Oh, hello. All right. Here we go. I'm going to go live again. This is the second time that I have done so. And hopefully, everything is coming in much cleaner this time. I'm doing some tests. This is new territory for me, and you see the white in the beard. So, yeah, it's going to be a work in progress, right? Old people got to learn new things, right? So that's what we're going to do. Hey, the last time I came in, well, I've done a couple of podcasts since the normal traditional way that I've been doing them, which is to record ahead of time and then post. Obviously, you probably can tell that from when I go live, it's not really all that much different because I get in there and then I give you the content and I move on. Today, I'm doing this a little bit in response to what happened the last time. So I talked about, you can't deal with extraordinary things in ordinary ways. It doesn't work. And so I wanted to slow walk it because I've gotten some feedback. I've had some conversations since the last time that I did the conversation about that. And what I want to hit today that's really important to me, and hopefully some of you will. I mean, whether you join me live or not right now, that's great. But what I'm really looking for is that this content be something that you can share with people. Um, I want to walk you through the dysfunction that can come from a functional place. So, in an extraordinary situation, as you've heard me say before, in an extraordinary situation, say like a car accident, you don't walk up and do an ordinary thing. It doesn't work well. You have to do extraordinary things in extraordinary situations. You got to also do ordinary things in ordinary situations. But what happens when an extraordinary becomes an ordinary? So, for instance, a simple, history look, right? Uh, the idea of war. When you're in living in a location, and war is an extraordinary event, but sometimes the extraordinary event, war, can become ordinary day to day life. Suicide bombers, same thing. It could, there's a lot of things that may start off extraordinary and then become ordinary, meaning we just don't make it stop, right? Like war and stuff like that. Okay, so hang with me for a second. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to imagine a scenario where you respond to, say, some type of abuse. Like I see this clinically all the time. Sexual or physical abuse, and so you have an extraordinary response, right? You fight, flight, freeze. Those are extraordinary responses that happen under extraordinary conditions. And so when that occurs, we can get stuck in the I have to treat everything like it's extraordinary. Anxiety goes up, panic attacks happen more routinely. We become dysfunctional in what we needed in that moment, that one time, because now we're treating ordinary situations as though they are extraordinary. We meet somebody new and we immediately think they're going to hurt me when there's a very good chance that's not true. I'm not saying it can't be true, but it's based on an experience we had in an extraordinary moment. So when extraordinary becomes ordinary and we keep extraordinary or responses, then that would make sense because it continues to be extraordinary. But when extraordinary becomes ordinary, meaning it flips back to more typical, we had this anomaly and the anomaly is now gone, and we keep those extraordinary responses, we then become dysfunctional because now we're functioning in a way that isn't going to work. The fight, flight, freeze, the anxiety, the panic attacks, the trauma responses, whatever you want to title them. So we have to be able to flip back to ordinary responses. And some people don't do that. So today I thought I'd come in here and say when extraordinary becomes ordinary, we have to stay in the extraordinary response. But when extraordinary flips back to a more typical, more ordinary situation, then what we have to do in that moment is go, okay, wait a minute. The extraordinary is no longer in place. I have to switch back to ordinary responses. And if I don't do that, I then become dysfunctional. So, what happens if a person gets stuck using extraordinary responses? We see this with kids pretty easily. Tantrums, unnecessary tantrums. They're not dying. They're not, their life isn't going to end. And yet all indicators would suggest their life is about to end. So, in a situation like that, we have to go back to the basics. We have to teach ordinary and extraordinary. In the most extreme situations, we see fantasy reality distortions. We have to teach reality is different than fantasy. Uh, the current social and cultural issues that come to mind. Um, I brought these up in a previous one. I know because I'm just looking back at my notes. I talked about the Carmelo Anthony and Kilmar Abrego Garcia. When we are talking about deportation, deportation right now is in an extraordinary treatment model. We're treating it as though it's extraordinary because it is. This is the amount of immigration that occurred in the US. It may be some of the most massive amounts of immigration the world has ever seen, potentially. I mean, you could do the research, but it's up there. It is definitely up there. In a 4-year period, conservative numbers would say 7+ million in 4 years. That is conservative. Some people would suggest it's been up closer to the 20 million mark in 4 years. That's unheard of historically. So, depending on what data you're looking at, and I know the data isn't always real great, but that is significant. That is extraordinary. And so, having some extraordinary process, that doesn't mean you lose humanity in the process, because that's just a bad idea. You still treat people like people and you have expedited processes. Okay. And will mistakes be made? Look, I don't care what process you use, mistakes will be made. They're just purely based on human error factor, there will be mistakes, human error. And then when we look at the system and how complex the system is set up, the legal system, super complex, the social systems, super complex, the law enforcement, just the personnel, the way that I say ICE would have to function, super complex. There isn't a simple way to do this. But if we continue the extraordinary process, once we get through our initial stage, then we will be dysfunctional. Right now, it's not actually dysfunctional. It's extraordinary response to an extraordinary situation. 6 months, a year from now, if we're still using this model, I'm not saying it's going to turn into this, but we saw stuff like that in World War II. We did. We have something to learn from. Why not use it? In World War II, there was some extraordinary processes for extraordinary situations. But the ones that sustained extraordinary processes in the ordinary situations became the post World War II dysfunction. So other countries outside of Germany became more dysfunctional because they were functioning from that high fear, like they were assuming the most heinous evil was continuing before, and it wasn't. It had been stopped. Now, there is a transitional period after, something extraordinary does occur, where you have to then migrate back toward the ordinary. You can't just flip the switch. That makes sense. But if we don't migrate back toward ordinary after the immigration stuff that's going on right now comes to a waning stage, we if we don't do that, we will become dysfunctional. We will. Um, it is also getting very common for people on social media, as I've been reading at least, to the tariffs are another example of extraordinary. It's not the tariffs themselves that are extraordinary. Like we talk about tariffs all the time. I mean, tariffs, other countries, they make their living off of tariffs. But in the US, they're a bad thing. No, they're not. If we use it to incite mm, a a war, essentially an economic war, like we're doing with China, and the US is doing this with China. Most of y'all know this stuff. But if we do it to create an extraordinary circumstance, then I could argue that, like, what would be the incentive there? Like, why would we want to do that? I'm not saying it's not a good idea, but we've got to know what the incentive is. If the incentive is, hey, get to the table and have a conversation, let's be reasonable. Okay, fine. Sometimes it takes I'm not saying this is a good thing, but it takes the threat of an extraordinary situation. The idea that it's possible it could happen, not the threat is in like, we're going to threaten you, but hey, laying it out saying, hey, we're willing to do this extraordinary because what's happening right now, we believe is more on the extraordinary side than the more ordinary or common behavioral side. Now, that's probably the case with China right now, frankly, because right now the tariffs in China are dysfunctional. Like they are so lopsided, it's ridiculous. And a lot of people in the U.S. who run businesses have outsourced to China. So there's a lot of American citizens, business owners, and people who run organizations that are frustrated and thinking, what do I got to do? If all we did from the tariff stuff was bring back the people who are the American industry to the United States, that would be a massive victory. If that's the goal, I mean, in my opinion, just say it, because that means that once that goal is met, we can go back to the more typical, ordinary processes. We don't have to continue to treat China as an extraordinary situation. We just be like, hey, we were just doing a shout out to our own people, saying, hey, yo, come back here and help your people. Great. Okay, fine, whatever. I mean, most countries, frankly, they do that. They do that. I don't know if that's the agenda here, but that is, look, taking care of yourself. Coming back, let's break that down psychologically for a second. To come back to it psychologically, if I am no good for the people around me, I have to do something to take care of me first. The easiest one to go to is you're on an airplane and the oxygen masks drop. And what do they tell you? Everybody knows this. If you've been on a plane anyway, you know this. Put your oxygen mask on before assisting anybody else with their oxygen mask. Why do we do that? Because if I help three people get their oxygen mask on, but I don't put mine on, and because of that, I pass out, I then become the problem. I am the issue. I am the extraordinary situation. So there is a certain amount of personal well-being that has to be maintained. Countries are no different. We as a country, as any country would, as Canada would, as Mexico would, as it's any country in South America would, as Europe, France, as Ukraine, as Russia, as China. They're all set up to do the same thing. It's to make sure that I can breathe so that I can then decide where and who to help next. Now, I know some countries don't function from the premise of, can I make them better? They function from the premise of, I want to make me bigger and stronger and more greedy. I'm not talking about that. That's dysfunction too. That's a different level of dysfunction. But if we take care of ourselves, we can then provide greater assistance to others. And that's just that's one of those psychological truths. Okay. Let's see. To try to wrap up, because I'm going to have to head out here pretty quick. Uh, so if you find yourself in an ordinary situation functioning in extraordinary ways, the problem then is you. Now, I know that's not the easiest thing to take. I get it. But that is the problem. You are now the problem. When that occurs, get feedback, get help, open your mind. It seems counterintuitive, when we're functioning in extraordinary ways, but in ordinary situations, our tendency is to confirmation bias means it, it means to uh, look at the situation and make it fit what we already perceive. That is not the time for confirmation bias. That is the time to open our mind and say, wait a minute, what might I be missing? If you find yourself using ordinary processes in extraordinary situations, then it's the exact same process. Be careful, because confirmation bias is going to want to turn that extraordinary situation into an ordinary, because we're going to want to make ourselves correct. That's a tendency, a human tendency we have. But instead, what you got to do is open your mind and say, what am I missing? Okay. It's that open mind, that mindset is the first thing that has to shift. It is always that. All right. Hey, I know this was pretty short. I appreciate those of you who might have stepped in. Thank you. Hopefully in the future, I'll be able to get these sort of scheduled out if I like them, and I'm still trying to decide. But I also want to check the video quality, the audio content, stuff like that from doing it this way from time to time until I get it down. I also know that there's ways to put backdrops in, so I may play with that next time if I have a chance. But thank you so much for joining us. As always, we appreciate your time. We're trying to help you in the conversation. Please share this with anybody who might benefit from it, and I hope you have a wonderful day.